Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our very first Ocean Talks webinar. I am Matt Porteous, the co-founder of Ocean Culture Life, or OCL, and we're thrilled to be kicking things off today. This webinar has been a dream of ours for a long time, a way to connect powerful stories from the ocean, its people, and inspire real change through education and shared experiences. We founded OCL 10 years ago to build a vibrant, connected ocean community, and last year we launched our platform to make this vision even more accessible. These ocean talks are all about hearing inspiring stories from creators, conservationists, and ocean lovers around the globe. A space to connect with like-minded people and feel part of something much bigger than ourselves. We want you to learn something new, feel inspired to take action and build ties with a wider ocean community away from constant noise and social media. Whether you're at home or traveling the world, we encourage you to reach out to fellow community members, organize your own meetups, and share your ideas, inspirations, and stories with us. Together we are stronger, and your feedback means everything to us as we grow this series. During today's session, we'll have a poll that I've shared with all of you. Feel free to fill it out as we go along. And after we wrap up, please keep an eye out for our post-event survey. Please share your thoughts openly, and it is the only way of working together that truly positive and inspiring stories of hope for our oceans and people can come together. So we're going to dive into this webinar today with our fabulous Tamsin Rain and our other amazing panelists here today. And thank you very much all for joining us.
Thanks, Mr. P. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. This is a bit of a full circle moment. See so many amazing faces, people that we've worked with for a long time, some new faces as well. And unfortunately, I can't see all your faces, all 80 of you, but really looking forward to reading some of your questions. Be interactive from the start. This is about open conversation, but before I allow the panel to introduce themselves, their wonderful selves, I just wanted to touch on why we're here tonight. Other than being able to share the room with some amazing people, we want to talk about why this theme matters so much. So marine protected areas, or MPAs as we know them, are one of the most important tools we have for safeguarding ocean health, and they help protect biodiversity, and they give the ecosystems the space they need to recover and thrive. And we're going to hear a little bit more about that from some of our experts today. They help to strengthen our resilience to climate change, and by protecting things like seagrass and mangroves and coral reefs that lock away carbon. So we're going to hear a little bit more about why MPAs are important. But it's not just about nature. This really is about people too. Like a lot of the things when it comes to the ocean, healthy ocean means healthy livelihoods, and in many parts of the world, protected areas are, support sustainable fisheries. They create so many more opportunities for people living in and around the ocean space through ecotourism, and providing obviously the long-term food benefits as well for the security for communities all around the world. And we'll hear a little bit more about that too. So as we might already know, globally, some of you might have heard of the coin 30 by 30, which is a target that we're working very hard towards, protecting at least 30% of the ocean by 2030. And this is really important. I think MPAs are not a one size fits all approach, and every place with its own culture, its history, its challenges. What might work in Jersey might not work as well and look very different in places like Kenya and Mexico. And that's what tonight's really about too: knowledge sharing, opening up these conversations where we can learn from each other. And that's why we're here to learn from our group, from scientists to community leaders, filmmakers, people around the world that are working in very different contexts. So together we'll hear a little bit more about their journeys. And with that context in mind, let's meet our panel. I'm going to pass over to my left straight away. You'll probably be able to see very different things, to Freddie. And Freddie, if you could introduce yourself, and then
Thanks.
we'll pass over to Ian.
Great, thanks, Tamsin. Scary to be the first one to introduce myself, but my name is Freddie Watson. I work for a marine conservation charity called Blue Marine Foundation, and our main mission is to protect 30% of the world's oceans by the year 2030. So very much working on that 30 by 30 narrative. And I've been working on the Channel Islands project for the last 5 years. So initially based over in Jersey, but then we've been expanding out to the rest of the Channel Islands, Guernsey, Sark and Alderney. And my line of work really focuses on managing the different types of science and policy, education and engagement, and working with local fisheries to try and really generate support and push through some policies on marine protected areas.
Amazing. Thanks, Freddie. Over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Tamsin. Hi, my name's Ian Campbell, based in the UK. I work for the Paddy Aware Foundation. So I don't know how many of you are divers out there, but you've probably heard of Paddy, the Professional Association of Dive Instructors. The Paddy Aware Foundation, we are the non-profit arm that work directly with Paddy divers in the recreational dive sector on a whole suite of marine conservation issues. And we're working on marine protected areas, predominantly, as you would imagine, in the coastal areas and in countries with a high tourism sector. And yeah, I'm looking forward to kind of learning as much as imparting what we do.
Thanks so much, Ian. Frida, over to you.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. My name is Frida Lara. I'm based in Mexico, in La Paz. I work in an NGO called Orcas, and I'm the scientific coordinator. I did my PhD in Revillagigedo, in the national park that is known as the Mexican Galapagos. And currently I work with shark fishermen that are transitioning from shark fishing to conservation. So I'm looking forward to this discussion with you.
I'm looking forward to asking you lots of questions, Frida. Mark, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mark Omboy from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm an all-round story lover, and I genuinely believe stories have the power to change the world, and I'm using that power to save our oceans, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. Martina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Martina Repczyk. Difficult Polish surname. It always looks like you just hit a bunch of keys at the keyboard. I'm a filmmaker and photographer and ocean advocate, and I try to use my art to kind of translate the more difficult stories that surround us and to make urgency more tangible. And that's what I do. So last time we sat on a panel, Tamsin, was UNOC. So I'm very excited that we brought it now into a digital realm, because it was not so accessible for many, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I completely agree, Martina, and that's what we want to see much more of, and also more faces at places like UNOC. Ladama, over to you.
Thanks, Tamsin. My name is Ladama Masidza, and I'm so glad and excited to be here with all of you from wherever you're calling in. I'm based in Kenya, and my passion is showing how communities and Africa's youth can drive transformation, whether it's through conservation, storytelling, education, or fisheries co-management. I help create spaces where local voices shape global solutions.
Thanks, Tama. And Julian.
Hi everyone, my name is Julian Hebenstreit. I'm also one of the filmmakers you guys will talk to and hear from today. I'm based in Germany, so this is a really good time of day for me. And yeah, I'm a photographer and filmmaker as well. And I like to think that it's not the hard part to take pretty photos, but to find out how to use them best to, work on something more meaningful. So yeah, I'm happy to be here and find out more about all the panelists.
Thanks, Julian. So for those of you in the audience that aren't aware, Mark, Ladama, Julian and Martina all worked across some amazing films recently to help us push and promote MPAs and specific MPAs that they're talking to. So if you haven't had the chance to watch those films, make sure you do. They're short, they're sweet, and they are straight to the point. They're powerful pieces. And I think we can all learn something, not only from the film, but also the way those stories have been told. So we'll lean into that in a little bit. But we're going to kick off. We're going to go straight in. And like I said, please do ask questions as we go. And Matt and I can keep an eye on that Q&A and bring it up to the people that we're speaking to. So I'm going to come over to you first, Ian. So you have mentioned that with Paddy Aware, you work across kind of everything from NGOs to governments. And I suppose my question would be, what's kind of that one kind of lesson that you keep coming back to around MPAs that you think maybe applies everywhere, or does it apply everywhere?
Nice, easy one to kick off. Yeah. So I think with marine protected areas, I mean, you must remember that they could be huge offshore MPAs. They could be small coastal marine protected areas. So trying to find something that connects MPAs, you know, as a kind of global lesson, can be difficult. But one thing I definitely have learned is that designation of MPAs is the easy bit, but it's implementation of MPAs. I think marine protected areas have to be implemented effectively to achieve the objectives that they need to achieve, whether that's huge protected areas for migratory commercial fisheries like tuna species or migratory species, or small discrete marine protected areas for distinct habitats or highly sedentary species. Definitely implementation is key, and the divers see that, you know, when divers are in the water, they see things that are happening firsthand. And what we are seeing as PADI Aware Foundation is the more effective an MPA is implemented, the more it's kind of meeting its objectives.
Yeah, no, totally. I think it, you know, it's so simple for us to be able to say, oh, this method or this particular kind of blueprint that works here can work here too. But I think, Freddie, you could probably speak to that quite a lot. And my question to you is that you have faced a lot of, you know, quite obvious challenges firsthand. And how do you balance kind of the kind of conservation with livelihoods when creating new protections? Like, coming from Jersey, I'm aware of those challenges that Blue and the community have faced. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit on what's happening, maybe in Jersey specifically, or in Europe, Blue.
Yeah, nice hard question to start off with, Tamsin. Yeah, so I think as you say, the challenges around balancing conservation and livelihoods is probably one of the more difficult ones to answer. From Jersey's perspective, the way that they did it really well was initially just trying to hear from all the different voices and all the different perspectives of the different stakeholders. That's really key, is to have that in-depth, comprehensive consultation across all different marine users, no matter what their marine use is, and hearing from all their voices and trying to understand all the evidence too. Then once you start putting those all together, you can then start to make a really informed decision, which can try and reach that win-win scenario that you're looking for. But it's very difficult to reach that, and it's sometimes it's not achievable, sometimes it is. As you say, MPAs aren't a one-size-fits-all. So what's happened in Jersey? Jersey's done it quite well in terms of hearing from all those voices. They've gone through quite a very in-depth consultation process. So I think a lot of places can actually learn from Jersey in that perspective. But Jersey's quite small, so it's quite easy to do that. The bigger the country you are, the bigger the area you are, the more difficult it is to do that. So if we're talking about the UK and Europe, for example, the UK is going through a stage 3 consultation of thinking about removing mobile fishing gear, so that's dredging and trawling activities, from their MPAs. So that's quite an intensive consultation that's happening at the moment. And it's also happening, it's the same theme as happening across a lot of European MPAs too. So there's a lot of the protected areas in Europe don't actually have protections from damaging fishing gears like dredging and trawling. So all these countries across Europe and the UK, they're both looking at trying to remove those activities from those MPAs. And in order to do that, you're going to have to start trying to understand from these different perspectives. And as a result, one of the biggest discussion points at the moment is transition. How do you transition those damaging fishing gears away to more lower impact and sustainable fishing methods? Because you can't just bring in a ban or permissions to restrict certain fishing gears without a solution. So I think providing that solution is really important, and that's a very big discussion point right now across Europe and the UK.
Maybe talking about more low impact alternatives, Dharma and Dishon, maybe I'll come to you, because I think that's something that, you know, the MPA around Kuruitu has done particularly well. Maybe you could talk to that a little bit. You're there? Are they there?
And thanks a lot. I just
Love
wanted
it.
to check if
You're there.
Dishan is here, as someone who's been able to work more on the technical side of things. I think he's got some good answers there.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Dishon Morage. I work here. I'm based in Kenya, but generally I work within the East African region. I'm currently a technical advisor at one of the organizations is actually working in the Kuruitu community, a community that have actually been running one of the oldest closures or Tengefu in Kenya, established way back in 2006. It's a closure that I'm pretty familiar with from its inception to its current development, and I still continue supporting it for nearly 20 years now. So I see the discussion is revolving around marine parks. Just to bring that in Kenya, we have two different scenarios regarding how marine parks or rather areas that where restrictions are. We have what we refer to as the state-run marine parks, which is like the marine parks that are run by the Kenya Wildlife Service, KWS. And then we have other areas that are outside the state, the gazetted marine parks and reserves that are essentially run by local communities through entities like what is referred to as the beach management units. But they run these areas in partnership with both the national and the county governments. The national government is usually the Kenya Fisheries Service, and the county government is the county directorates, the Department of Fisheries. So you'll see the keyword there is fisheries, which essentially means these are areas where fishing takes place. And in the current arrangements provided under the legal framework, which is both the Fisheries Management and Development Act 2016, as well as the Beach Management Unit Regulations of 2007, revised in 2024, provide for beach management units to establish closures or areas where there is no fishing. They can also establish closures where fishing is permitted, but for certain fishing gears, even temporary closures, which can be seasonally based, or even species restricted areas where certain species are not allowed. So for Kuruitu is actually a closure, which is a permanent closure. So since its establishment since 2006, the closure is permanent. So it essentially operates more or less like a marine park. So the key driver, the essence of rather, why we have these areas established is the bigger overall overriding objective is sustainable fisheries. So in case where communities are adapting these closures, whether they be temporary, permanent, gear, or species restricted, is driving towards ensuring either stocks are able to recover, essentially protecting breeding and spawning grounds, or ensuring critical habitats that could have essentially been facing with degradation or overexploitation, either be it coral reef or seagrass, are given an opportunity to recover. So that's the situation that we have in our country. Thank you.
Thanks, Dishon. I really appreciate that. And I've been lucky enough to actually, Matt and I have both been lucky enough to visit Kuruitu and actually see it, swim over the MPA into the non-protected area and just seeing the, the diversity and then leaning into what's happening in the community. And Adama, I want to come to you here because you're working obviously closely within Kuruitu. And talk to me about what makes that place unique in terms of what role young people play in leading the change, as well as the community leading the change.
Thanks a lot. So Kuruitu is special because it's a proof of concept of the power of community marine stewardship. So as Dishan mentioned, 20 years ago, the community came together to make this bold decision to set aside part of their fishing grounds as a no-take zone. And today we're talking about a legacy of restoration. Snorkeling in Kuruitu, you're met with a horizon of coral, different species, shapes, and colors, and not just schools of fish, but this is a whole campus. So there's even an area in the marine sanctuary that Katana, one of the leaders, calls Fish Meeting Point. Because if you get the chance to go there, you'll see why it's like Times Square for fish. And what really makes it even more unique and special is the engine of collaboration that it exemplifies. Different organizations coming together with the community to secure a 30-hectare sanctuary. And what's also unique about the space is it didn't stop there. They continued to go on to protect a wider 12,000-hectare co-management area, which is legally recognized by the government. So it's one of a kind in the country, and it shows us that when local knowledge, science, and collaborative energy come together, you can truly transform an ecosystem and the lives of those who live in it. And youth plays a massive role in this, because youth don't just inherit the future, they shape it. So if our youth are not equipped, if we don't bring them into the discussions now and invest in them, what future will they shape for our ocean, or will we shape for our ocean? And by 2030, you're looking at a youth population in Africa, which is projected to be almost 42% of the world's youth. So this can be a massive driving force for change that we want to see. But in many countries, such as Kenya, our youth are disconnected from the ocean and grow up that way. So we need to actively be able to bridge this gap and provide opportunities for youth to step into this leadership. We, the youth, are the drivers, the divers, the storytellers, the scientists, the policymakers of tomorrow. So we have the ability and the energy to take lessons learned and use them to innovate, ensuring that the work that we put today to secure our ocean ripples across time.
Ledama, give us a couple of examples, or even maybe just one example of how you are engaging youth, because I'm aware, but I know that a lot of people on this call would be very inspired by how you're doing that, because you've had such success with it.
So a really wonderful thing of how we're breaking this education gap when it comes to ocean education is one of the projects is Ocean Eyes, that Oceans Alive began in 2021, which provides local schools with the opportunity to come into the marine sanctuary and engage in coral restoration, not only learning about the theory, but slowly bridging that gap in that space between them and the ocean by entering it, taking part in restoring the coral and being able to go back, share the stories, and reimagine what, a different future for the ocean. And another example is through storytelling and education programs still within schools. So being able to go to different schools, share powerful films, sometimes even animations, and see how they respond. So also turning these classrooms into living classrooms. And another big part that I just enjoy doing is sometimes with the schools that we work with is going on marine walks, shallow rock pools. And just as you're walking along these rock pools, being able to see interesting things, whether it's a piece of seagrass and see how it feels, whether you spot a crab going somewhere, where is it going? Why was it out? And just by going through this immersive walk, you learn so much, and curiosity is filled in the mind of youth and students. So being able to tap into that and bring it into their thinking, into their perspectives, into the possible futures that they can be able to see for themselves in the community.
Amazing. Absolutely. Frida, I'm going to come to you in a minute a little bit more about how you're working with the communities on the ground there. But before I do, Mark, I wanted to come to you because you have an ability to document and showcase what Kenya is doing in a way that, I've not experienced before. So talk to me about what is it you look for when it comes to creating and telling that story? What inspiration do you need? How do you capture and communicate what's happening in Kenya to the rest of the world, which you've obviously done very well in the recent film that we commissioned?
I think something that Dama has alluded to is there is a big disconnection within our country with our oceans. Something that I've experienced as well as a city boy. And when I approach storytelling, for us it becomes, and especially with the ocean, it becomes very important for us to showcase the community and their connection or their disconnection. Because generally, I think being able to think of a better ocean for us has to be plugged into our people reconnecting back. And there are many layers that you can talk about when it comes to that, whether it's like historical slave trade. So those are massive disconnection between the ocean. The ocean is not a place you go to. I remember the first time I went diving and I was getting my PADI certifications. My mother would pray like, oh, he has gone close to where the devil sits. There's such a there's a big barrier of connection between us and the ocean. So when you're thinking about stories, how do we bridge that gap? How do we allow people to see this is actually a place that you can enjoy, that you can love being in, that you can feel connected to? And that's always a perspective that we come into it from. And I think the more we do that from a storytelling perspective, the more that my friends, the people who see the films go like, oh, I can do that. I can see that. Wow, that's there, and not just go to the beach and sit and touch the sand. I'm like, wow, that looks nice. Nice sunset. So a lot of our storytelling is really about driving and removing that barrier of interaction and connection.
I must say that's something that you and Dama do so well with the films that you create. So thank you for everything you do with that. And you don't just go out as a filmmaker, produce and, see where it ends up. You think about the distribution, about how you integrate it into the communities before you've even thought about what the film is going to look like. So I really respect and honor the way you all do that. Frida, I'm going to come to you next. So a little bit like Freddie and the team at Blue working directly with fishing communities, you also have been doing that extremely in Mexico. So how do you make sure that the local people feel ownership when it comes to MPAs when they're created and not feeling excluded?
Well, I think an important point is the common ground. I think it's important to discuss with them what are the main challenges and the main issues that they're facing nowadays, and also to start talking about the solutions. So it's important that we don't come up with MPAs that are already like in a very long process before we reach the communities. I think it's very important to reach them from the beginning and hear their opinions and their knowledge and combine it with the scientific information. So for us, it has been very important to create this trust, to really enforce this collaboration and co-design monitoring techniques. So we tried to involve the community as much as we can. They come with us and put sensors in the water, they do the maintenance with us, and it's important also to share the results. So we try to share it in a very simple and not very technical way. So the community also feels ownership of their own information, and they are also witness of the changes that are happening. So I think seeing artisanal communities and coastal communities as part and key collaborators of the conservation of their own resources is very important. And also for me is that when we are proposing a new research question or something like that, to discuss it with them, to first get their feedback, if they think it's a good idea or not, or what are their concerns, and then see this as a challenge for all together, as a team. And that has been very successful. They have been working with us for 4 years. And many of the fishermen that work with us are already finding new alternatives in their economic livelihoods. They are getting independent from shark fishing. And an important point is that we don't want fishing itself to finish, because we think artisanal fishing, sustainable and responsible fishing is important. And the only thing is that we need to find a way that we conserve the critical habitats, but also conserve the traditions and their knowledge. So I think those will be some important points to consider when you are doing something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everything from citizen science all the way through to the sharing the results so that they do feel that ownership. I think that's such a key part. I think it's something that we can all lean into more every time. You know, I don't think we could not be doing more of that if we tried. Martina, I think with your film as well, I know in terms of the Azores and everything that you've captured there, maybe you could lean into even how inclusivity when it comes to storytelling. So how you come and how you feel best to tell the story in terms of, are you involving the community in that narrative? How can we be better, more ethical storytelling when it comes to getting people involved?
Thank you. That's a very, very interesting question. I think this is hard to answer in general, because probably I would answer it differently when it comes to my short film Tiger Eyes, and maybe it lands differently in this MPA short film. But what I generally try to do is meet people at eye level, right? Because I am the foreign traveler who gets to experience nature and the waters, but it's certainly not me who knows these waters best. It is the artisanal fisherman, or it is the scuba dive club who dives there for years every day. And it's usually the skipper who knows the waters better than anyone. So for me, I just try to really take my ego, aside and listen and learn first, and then film with respect, and respect not only to the animals that I try to film and photograph, but also to the people who are living very much off that piece of coastline. But I don't know how to answer your question other than with respect.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that is key.
And I think that the reason I asked you that is because I think that really comes across in your films, and I've understood you from kind of pre-production through production, and one thing that's always been evident is you honoring the story. And I think as storytellers, we all need to become, again, be better at that. Really, actually, it comes from research and pre-production all the way through to how we are on location and how we work and how we kind of present ourselves, all the way through to distribution. How is this film or this piece of art or creative going to live within the community and benefit them? So I think that's why I asked you the question, is because it's something that I think you personally do extremely well. Julian,
thank you.
This as well with your film as well, and understanding the complexities of this subject, MPA, very different in various parts of the world, and how can we best communicate what's happening in one place, and maybe how it's not one size fits all, but to get across kind of the main key points within a certain area.
That's also not an easy question to answer. In Alor specifically, the MPA really is not only the ocean, but the people themselves. They grew up around the ocean. They surf from 3 years old. And I was just a guest coming from thousands of kilometers away from a country who's basically emptied out the Northern Sea, just in my backyard. So to be able to tell that story of a place where a community basically protects the ocean by just being there and being responsible and being connected with it, was really a privilege. And I can't even tell what it is about that place specifically that translates the MPA so well, because it's on the one side generational wisdom. Of course, the people who have been there for thousands of years. They've learned to treat the ocean in a sustainable way that people like us, or I'll speak for myself, me, could probably never fathom. And it's, in the end, it's not the people who live there who are a danger or threat to the MPA or the area around it, but it's the people who travel there, including me, and the possibility of damaging or threatening local wildlife just because you don't know what awaits you there, so to speak. So I also can't really answer your question, but it's important to think about the people who are there and are successful in what they do before you tell the story at any place. I think not only we didn't really talk to any of the policymakers or politicians, because especially in that part of Indonesia, Eastern Indonesia, it's very disconnected from the usual politics you would find in the Java region or Bali, etc. So it was really interesting to see how it kind of was kind of a local government, but not consisting of the typical chambers and the meetings and all that stuff, but of the different people who are just advocates for the ocean and who know how to treat it right, you know?
Well, I think your film was incredibly beautiful, powerful, and a real testament to the incredible work that is being done there. And I think you did it real justice. So thank you for sharing that. Talking about policy, which we can't not talk about. Ian, I'm going to come to you on this. I think can all agree that there's a massive gap between what science shows is needed and what policy delivers. So how do you feel, and everyone can pitch in on this a little bit, and again, audience, please bring in your opinions here too, but how can we close that gap?
So actually, this is slap bang on what Paddy we're working on citizen science. But if you kind of think of the limits of what we class as traditional science, that there's only a certain limit as to what scientific monitoring and data gathering can cover with the kind of academic rigor, especially across the vast different types of MPAs and in coastal deep water areas. And often MPAs encompass all of those, or part of those, or multiple components of those. So this is where kind of I think citizen science can really step in, and well-designed and well-delivered citizen science programs can help bridge that gap between very specific scientific data shortages and kind of getting getting that information to decision makers. Also, where I think citizen science plays a real critical role is, I'm long past being classed as a scientist anymore, but scientists speak their own language and they speak very fluently amongst each other. And I'm speaking as someone who's only basically bilingual, but they speak this language, and it's quite it can be exclusionary language. If you don't understand the science, then that's your problem. And obviously, the people who design MPAs, they're politicians, they're decision makers, governments designate MPAs, so they need that simplistic language. So citizen science can kind of bridge that gap, but citizen science does need to really be designed well. And I think citizen science projects, especially when it comes to MPAs and ocean conservation, can fall into one of two traps. They're either too citizen-y, where they really feel good, when you collect data that doesn't really add any value to making political decisions or ocean conservation, or they're way too scientific that you probably need an advanced degree in marine biology to even understand what data you're collecting. So Paddy Ware Foundation, we've got long-standing marine debris citizen science program, and we are now launching some MPA-focused citizen science. There's 28 million registered PADI divers. There's 7,000 PADI dive centres globally. Lots of those are either within, the dive centres are either within or adjacent to marine protected areas. And it's about using that scale to collect the data that is meaningful from a decision-making and policy-making standard. So that's where we come in. We've got this scale. Let's help design. We work with scientific community. We're not looking at research. We're looking at kind of that scale and implementing that, so we can kind of try to close that gap. The citizen science has its limitations, but so does science itself. So does pure science, and that's where we kind of really need to try to bridge that gap.
And Ian, with the PADI Aware program and with that element, is it relatively easy and free for everyone to sign up to become a partner with this, or is it?
Yes. So we got a long-standing marine debris program. We are about to launch a shark and ray program. We are also imminently about to launch biodiversity within MPA, a citizen science program. these are relatively simple, but without being simplistic, citizen science programs. So if you go onto the PADIWare website, we've just, one of the limitations we've had was the tech piece. We've had a long-standing citizen science program for 13 years on marine debris. Now, the technology 13 years ago is not, I understand it, but my daughter will say, what is this? It's still on dial-up and 15 minutes to connect to your internet. But so we've just finished relaunching our data collection tech portal. So now it's become a lot more intuitive. And just as kind of one simple thing is divers are moving away from having plastic cards to show their divers, now virtual logbooks. And now when we collect citizen science data, that will be linked to the virtual logbook. So you will not even have to download multiple apps. And there's a lot of barriers to citizen science that, do you need to download 3 or 4 apps and do they speak to each other, and where does this thing go? And yes, you may feel good for doing something, but is it doing anything? Kind of removing those barriers is a key component to make it just as citizen friendly as it is scientifically rigorous.
Yeah, I must say the PADIWare site and the map and being able to access that data is really well done.
And I think, with some of the experts we've got, the key bit that is sometimes missing is the storytelling aspect. If people do one survey, they want to know what's happened, what's that data part of, what's the story that they won, their one sighting of marine debris, or their one coral restoration program, or their sighting of shark ring. How does that feed in, and what's the narrative back? Because feedback loop, if you do not tell people the story of where their data fits in, they're not going to come back and do more.
Completely agree. And when I was looking at the PADIWare map, I was like, this is very much like the OCL map. Maybe the two can work together. So you never know. Frida, I'd love for you to kind of chip in on that a little bit, because a lot of what Ian was saying, how citizen science can be successful, maybe some of the challenges and barriers, maybe you can elaborate on what's working well for you.
Yes, I think as Ian was saying, especially just to mention it, in developing countries, the resources for doing research are very limited. Like the governments normally are not very interested on sponsoring or supporting this research. So researchers normally are struggling a lot to maintain the receivers, to go to these very offshore areas. So working together with the tourism industry is very important. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to be more sensibilized about the importance of these places, and being able to give the opportunity to give back. Like you are experiencing one of the most biodiverse places in the world, but you can contribute to their knowledge, to their information about these places. And I think as Ian was saying, if we design these platforms well, and it's transparent, and people understand how this information is used and how important this information is for decision making, for policy making, is very, very important. So I think as we were talking about youth, this new generation of researchers are more worried about the final product, like the final result, other than the authorship. And I think that's critical, because nowadays we are understanding that we can create agreements or formalize the collaborations, and that's it. Like we can put the rules of the game first, and then we are all tranquil, and then we can share our information and share our efforts. So I think those are critical points for researchers and tourism industry working together.
Yeah, absolutely. Ian, just quickly back on the PADIWare, the data that's been collected over the hundreds, maybe decades. Would someone like Blue Marine or an entity be able to tap into and lean into that data? Is it publicly available?
So it's publicly available with caveats. Obviously, we are beholden under data protection kind of. We don't want to give away people's personal information. But we do have lots of freely, there's no cost data sharing agreements. So if, for example, somebody wanted specific data on a specific site, that we would be able to set up data sharing agreements. So yes, we've got lots in place with governments, with academic researchers, with dive centers, with individuals. They want to see their own data. So the aggregated data is publicly available, but if you wanted specific stuff, we can certainly do that. And one of the things that we are moving towards with citizen science is not just counting what people do see or don't see. Do see, but it's also focusing on what people don't see. So 0, if you don't have a sighting or you don't see something, 0 is just as important number as if you see a million fish or a billion fish or whatever. You can see what's happening if you put the importance on that. And with the dive operators who are able to go to the same dive spots over and over again, you can build up data sets at specific sites, and you can see trends, and that's where it'll fit into marine protected areas. But yes, please, if anyone wants to look at data sharing. In fact, yesterday we launched with our new tech platform, we've just launched our automated data sharing request portal. So what a timely question that is, Tamsin.
There you go. That's amazing. Freddie, I'm going to come to you a little bit about what we've just discussed with Frida and Ian. Having kind of followed Blue's work for some time, everything from policy also through to storytelling, just a bit off-road question, but how important is the storytelling piece for an organization that are working, across so many different kind of jurisdictions for Blue? What role?
It's so important, Tamsin. It's at the end of the day, it's kind of what wins the hearts and minds of the community and also the key decision makers. So obviously you have the local community, and I think having community backed MPAs is the best form of MPA almost. But then also you need to win over the votes of those policymakers. And in Jersey, I think there's 49 state members. And you need a majority to get something through. And at the end of the day, you can do as much science and as much engagement and education as you want, but if you haven't won those votes over, or if you haven't kind of managed to convince those politicians to vote for that marine protected area or that particular management measure, then all that work is you're kind of hard done by. And I think storytelling is really key to really push that over the edge, basically.
Yeah, I want to just add to that as well with this storytelling piece. I think a lot of the time people quickly assume that comes in the form of photography and film, which it very much does. But I think one thing that OCL have seen massive impact and success, and a lot of what Dharma and Mark and the team there are doing, is how that story then lives and integrates itself within the community itself. So Dharma, you might want to add to that, but it's something that I've seen you do remarkably well. It's almost like you go on tour with the story. And it's a beautiful thing.
Thanks a lot for that. And I fully agree with what's being said. And I'm going to start, first of all, with the ownership of the story. So by bringing back the story to where it was created, to where it was told, because sometimes people can forget to do that. You can go to a space with a community, shoot a story, and then leave. Next week, you're on to shooting a different story next week, and the story never comes back to the community. So by first of all bringing it back, it creates a sense of ownership, but also a sense of trust, and it also gives a tool which will extend far more than just where the story will be premiered in all the different places. And another aspect is bringing a story to, let's say, a community which may be facing a similar issue, but by seeing how another community has been able to overcome this challenge, the inspiration, it just clicks in, because when it comes to storytelling, as much as science gives us data, policy sets the rules, storytelling moves hearts and can shift mindsets. Because at the end of the day, every policymaker, fisher, donor is first. a human being, and films and stories allow them to feel a part of the change that is taking place. And change that lasts is change that's driven together. And so it really helps create that bond. And I've seen this happen, you know. So with this, it makes it more personal, makes the challenge being narrated in the film or in the story you're talking about, you're sharing, it makes it more personal to the people who are listening to it, especially if, once again, they're facing the same challenge, or that is their community, or they are a vessel for sharing this knowledge with other communities. And why it's also very important is because to change a whole system, it requires critical mass. You know, it takes a village, it really does. And most people in this critical mass may not be your scientists, your policymakers, or even environmentalists, or even aware of how important the ocean is. So stories are a powerful tool that can reach the masses where they are, offer new perspectives that lead them to act, and create a collective sense of ownership in the solution, in the challenge, in the celebration of our ocean.
So thanks to that. I agree to everything you say. And I think off the back of that, I want to come to our filmmakers. Martina, Julian, Mark, you've each spent time capturing MPAs through film. So was there a moment from filming that maybe stayed with you or changed the way you think about MPAs? Maybe Martina, I can come to you first.
So, I mean, I guess there's so many powerful moments that I could recall in an instant that really run so deep. But there was a moment in the Azores that was one of my first dives there, where I was diving in this then marine protected area that was really small. It was a seamount, and it was a blue dive. I had no reference line, nothing. And then all of a sudden I was engulfed in a huge school of Mobula tarapacana. And these are like the second largest mobula ray. And I was surrounded by 40 of them. And that was just this absolutely mesmerizing and surreal experience that it just got to me in a way that nothing ever has before. And although I was on scuba, I momentarily forgot where I am, where I end, where I exist, where, you know, am I one of the school, the swarm that I breathe? I don't know. So it was just this magical moment where I was just completely in awe. And all of a sudden there were then shadows coming over me, and I thought this must be some whale shark or some big shark coming up. And it was huge, gigantic tuna that was swarming all around us. So tuna that was bigger than myself. And that was one dive. And then when I came up from the dive, because the area at the time, that was a couple of years ago, the MPA that I made the film about, it came into policy end of last year. So that was fairly recent, right? And when we got up from the dive, there was a fishing vessel right at the end of our boat, and it was fishing tuna. And that broke my heart because, and we called the captain and we tried to intervene, but they said that everything is under correct policies because they were not fishing at the no take zone. They were literally just outside. And this is the problem with marine protected areas as well, that life doesn't find these borders, and humans know exactly how to exploit them. So this is something that really stuck with me since. So this abundance and this human mind that wants to create profit out of every tiny little bit in Kona. So yeah, that's where most of the footage was from.
Amazing, thanks, Martina. I can't even imagine that moment. I kind of just got engrossed in you telling us then, so I can't even imagine the feeling. Mark, what about you?
I think the dam and I definitely share the same moment. which is when you think you're very clever and you're sticking a GoPro near the rock to to film the octopus, and the octopus decides to film you. I think that was quite a moment. I think Dama was feeling very, very tricky and very sneaky. I have been here. I know this place more than you. And so just to come out with footage, seeing the octopus actually pick up the GoPro and turn it and face it towards Dama was quite hilarious. And I think for me that also sort of bridges the gap and the connection between us and the marine life. Like, it's not just a place of observation, but it's also a place of interaction. And something about a marine protected area, especially the lagoon area, is when you dive there more and more and more, it's no longer a fishery, it's no longer an octopus, it's a friend, it's a character, it's someone you know. And I think that's special as a filmmaker, being able to move from I'm here to experience something to I'm here relating to my peer. And I think that's a powerful place to be as a filmmaker and a storyteller, and to connect with marine life in that way.
I loved that bit. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. Grabs the GoPro, turns around,
Yeah.
and like, okay, I'm the star of the show now. I thought that was brilliant. What a moment to capture. What about you, Julian? Was there any kind of standout moments, or did you learn something kind of really big takeaway from producing your film?
For me, there were a couple of very, very big, or I don't want to go overboard and say life-changing, but kind of changing something inside of the way I think about MPAs themselves. But one that has stuck with me till today was probably the first time I ever saw the blue whale, something that a lot of people travel throughout the whole world to see just once, or maybe to catch a glimpse of the huge blow. And it was really, really early in the morning, about like 5:30, and we were staying in the little town, very, very close to the edge of the water, probably like 10-15 meters, and then there was a reef stretching probably around 100 meters, and then you have to keep in mind Alor is very, very is a very, very deep channel, so it goes down to 400-500 meters fairly quickly. And I was awake. I don't know why. I was probably still jet lagged from the flight. And then I was outside on the terrace, and I heard the blow of the blue whale, just like a huge. And you know, me being me, I didn't know what it was, since I've never really seen a whale or heard what that sounds like. So I went to the water and you know, tried to find out what it was. Obviously, no one was awake yet, or at least that's what I thought. And then I went back to my house, and then I heard it again, and then I turned around and I saw the blow of the whale just at the edge of the reef, probably just like 100 meters away from where I was standing. And to like hear that huge animal just like casually strolling by the village and all the people was something I still think about today, because it was that early, because the boats and all the traffic throughout the channels hadn't started yet, so they're basically free to do whatever they want. And then I tried to alert everyone around me that there was a blue whale, and I walked down the beach kind of screaming like a madman. And then I saw like 2 or 3 guys just sitting in their lawn chair, and I was like, blue whale, blue whale. And I was like, ah, you know, keeping in mind that for them it's a totally different baseline. You know, people travel from all over the world to see that animal, and they just have it in their backyard as something that, you know, is a protected area also for them, or a safe haven for them, where they also have been known to you know, carry their children. So to see that, yeah, was something that has stuck with me till today, because it's really, really interesting to see how the locals have not only like grown accustomed to what is going on right in front of them, but also how they treat the animals themselves, because we also saw a couple of blue whales after that. And whenever there was a local boat, you know, out on the channel, of course we told them, and then they looked at it for like a couple of seconds, and then they took off, which for me, it never really had something to do with them not being interested in it, but just them kind of knowing their bounds and also knowing to respect the animal. Because if you had tour boats, like I think Frida can probably tell you a lot about that in Baja California, chasing after the animals, after the orcas, after the whale sharks. Those aren't the local people going on a trip. Those are the tour boats mostly, and all the people who come there to see and to chase that kind of feeling when you witness that animal. So the difference between the local wisdom kind of and what would happen if there were a lot of tourists around was really something that I still keep in mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just keeping an eye on time as well, everyone, just because I know that I want to take some time for questions, and I've seen some of them coming in, and I know some of the panelists are answering them as we go. There was one around citizen science, which I've seemed to have lost, but Frida, I was going to come to you next anyway, and I think the question was around, can you give us an example of what actually is citizen science? And then my other question for you was that you also study sharks and you're also an incredible storyteller and lots of different things. I don't know how you do it all, but talk to me about why sharks are central to MPAs and how do we communicate the importance of this to the wider public?
Well, I'm going to start with the second question. Sharks are very important because they are a health indicator. So when we get to see sharks in the water, we know that that ecosystem is healthy and they are the top predators. So they are on the top of the food chain and they are basically regulating the health of the whole ecosystem. And when there is like an invasive species or some virus in the prey population, they are able to select those ones that are sick and get rid of them. So that allows, and that's an example, for example, in the Mexican Caribbean, we had the lionfish. And when you had sharks or groupers, you could see that the lionfish didn't affect that much the reefs compared to other places that are fish out. So that's a great example of their role. And also they are vulnerable to some of the destructive fishing because they are one of the most important bycatch in many of the industries. And they have a very long-term life cycle and a very low reproduction. So when we have this industrial fishing going on close to coastal habitats, to their critical habitats, nursery areas, then you get to see the effects. And Mexico is a great example of that. We are the 4th country that exports more fins to China and Hong Kong. And obviously there are some industries that gets benefit from it, but also there are a lot of artisanal fishing communities that are already seeing the effects and the negative examples of that. And you can see how the food change and the animals in the ocean are getting lower and lower in the food chain. So you get to see more triggerfish or jellyfish, and this is an indicator that the ecosystem is not going very well. So as an example of that, and combining it with citizen science and local ecological knowledge, what we have done is participating mapping. So we go out with the fishermen, we show them the identification of different species, and we ask them where they see them and how long they was the last time they saw, for example, a great hammerhead. So for example, here we saw great hammerheads 40 years ago, but in the last 40 years, we haven't seen any great hammerheads. And they used to call them arqueadas, that means arch fin, and they are absent. So there are some examples of species that are completely gone. And obviously, each of these species play a role in the ecosystem. So being able to combine citizen science and science to publish this information in different ways is making people aware that if we don't do something now, obviously we will get to see more impacts. So I think it's very important to combine the two of them. And also sharks are migratory species. So as Martina was explaining, if we create small MPAs and we don't enforce them, obviously we are not covering the migratory paths of many of the species. So for us in Baja California Sur, studying sharks and whales, like especially blue whales, are a great example of why we need to protect 50 miles from the shore to the offshore. because we know that in these areas we can cover the migratory routes for many of the species. And if we cover places like Aupulmo, that is a great example of conservation, but it's only 7 square kilometers, it's not enough. It's good for maybe bull sharks or for reef fish, but not for mantas or for big sharks, no? So I think at this point where we are, Mexico is one of the countries that signed the compromise for 30% by 2030. We need to start thinking big, and we need to start thinking about large scale and highly and fully protected. And it's a big challenge because we have fishing communities, but I think we also have good examples in other countries where you can combine conservation and fishing with some responsible practices and a lot of work with the communities. But definitely sharks are a great example of this indication of change, no? And also the commitment for some communities to protect them.
Thanks, Frida. I know we've not really touched on regulation as a subject, and I think it's something we should talk a little bit to. And anyone can pitch in on this, and maybe Freddie and Ladama. Ladama, when I was in Kenya, one of the biggest things that took me by surprise was the ability for the community to completely take on board this concept of an MPA and help regulate it. It wasn't something they were enforced to do, it was something they wanted to do, including the fishers. So maybe talk to us a little bit about how the MPA is enforced, or at least, and again, maybe Dishon can elaborate on this a little bit, but how and why has it been a success there with the enforcement of the protected area itself?
Thanks a lot for that question, because regulation is one of the biggest challenges that does face Kenyan fisheries, whereby there is a quite elaborate plan and bylaws and policies set up. But now when you're on the water, how do you police that? How do you enforce that? How do you fully take on being a steward of it? And that's where there's been some gaps. To be able to do that, you need the financing to run these operations, to monitor, to surveil the area. And then also as well, very much so, is to be able to now have the capacity of the group, or the fisher group, to be able to do that. And in Kenya, what we have is our regulations allowed the opportunity, or allow beach management units, which are the devolved structure of community fisheries management, to enter in a partnership with the government and establish or develop a co-management plan and establish a co-management area. So it all looks very, good on paper, but now the roadmap of getting there is tricky, because some contexts are different depending on the community you're at. So in Kuruwitu, the approach started a very long time ago with the establishment of the locally managed marine area, the 30-hectare marine sanctuary. But even that wasn't fully legally recognized by the government. So it did take additional effort to see how it can now be within a structure where there is some of that legal regulation which is allowed. And that's when the avenue of going about this co-management approach came up. And co-management, it is a stepwise process where you need to have a number of things in order, but driven by the community from the start to the finish. And in Kuruwitu, this was a very interesting experience, but I'm going to pass over to Dishon to tell us a bit about the process and the technicalities of how we got to the 12,000 hectare co-management area.
Thanks a lot, Ledama, for that exposition. Just to add on that, is that Kenya, as is provided within the constitution that we had, the new one in 2010, it clearly provides that there must be participation of resource users in regard to any regulations or any legal frameworks that are developed to manage resources. So you'll find that whenever you're talking about forestry or fisheries, the subsequent legal frameworks, those are the acts, provide for the participation of the resource users. So if you go to the forestry, we have what we call Community Forest Association, which is an entity that brings together the resource users for that particular resource, be it a forest, together. And the CFA, that's the Community Forest Association, works together with the government to come up with a plan that outlines measures as well as any approaches to manage that particular resource. So when you come to fisheries, the government has identified a beach management unit, which is actually an entity that brings together the communities that depend on fisheries. And with that, that entity, that is the BMU, they work together to develop a common management plan, which identifies the area as well as management measures that are necessary to manage the resources within that area. So these management measures, as the earlier outline, includes, among others, the closures, the gear restrictions, data collection, enforcement monitoring, as well as any other measures. So it's actually a very well-structured process, outlining clearly what are the roles of the beach management units, the government, as well as the other stakeholders. So the Kuruitu, they have this 30-hectare closure established way before these regulations came into force. So what has happened is that since there is also an addition to ensure that we are not only implementing a specific measure, but also looking at how we manage the bigger area. These are the areas that are outside the closure that are actually fished. How do you ensure even the resources in those areas are well managed? And one of the approaches is to define these areas as co-management areas. Now, the approach that has been used since then is having this interface between traditional knowledge and essentially utilizing the knowledge that exists within the fishery. So when you are defining the areas where these management areas are going to be done, we approach through ensuring, or rather, interacting with fishermen to identify the fishing grounds. Locally, they are called the imbos. So in the sea, the fishermen simply, when they go out fishing, they don't simply spread their nets anyhow, but they have this traditional knowledge over a long extended period of time, where they're able to identify fishing grounds and how they have given them names depending on what kind of species they catch, and also depend on the seasons when they can fish those areas. So in developing the co-management areas, we use that knowledge to define the areas that will be included within a co-management area. So currently the Kuruitu Beach Management Unit has a 12,000 co-management area, within which we have the closure, the 30-hectare closure, and then the other area that is that about 11,970 hectares, which is actually not exactly closed, but there is sustainable fishing. What do I mean? Essentially, there are measures to control the kind of gears that are used. The BMU is undertaking patrols to ensure the enforcement of those measures, as well as collecting data, at the landing site on the fish that is landed. The data collection is done on a daily basis. So that's the co-management area. Now, since then, since we established this co-management area, fortunate enough, there is now, I can say, about 65% of Kenya territorial waters are actually within either co-management area or joint co-management areas. And there is co-management plans that have already been developed, outlining these measures to manage these areas. So 65%, we are talking now nearly about, I'll give it, it comes to around 638,000 hectares that are currently under co-management, that is managed by beach management units together with the Kenya national government as well as the county government. So Kenya, that has only been able to be done because we have supportive legal frameworks that ensure that participation of the communities provided for and is recognized, and the communities, when they're doing these patrols, in case they need to enforce, they need to arrest someone undertaking any illegal fishing activities, they can do so with a legal framework there to ensure that it's enforceable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dishon. That's really, I think that's so key in terms of the beach management program there as well, in terms of what other opportunities it provides the community when it comes to feeling like they have got control over what's happening in their waters. I think we can learn a lot. I know what's happening in the Maldives is they have restrictions around, you know, they have potentially in terms of boots on the ground, managing this is very slim, and they're expected to patrol such a massive area. So like you said, Dharma, I think it's a case of there's a massive gap in the finance, and then, you know, the legal potential legal framework might be there, but it's not being enforced in terms of how it's managed afterwards. So I think there's quite a vast gap there that we've all experienced in some way. Freddie, maybe you can just, I know we're short on time, we've probably got another 5 minutes maximum, maybe a couple minutes actually, and we just want to take some of these questions, but maybe you can talk a little bit to how it's regulated and controlled, not just within Jersey, but maybe talk to some of the other blues potential sites as well.
Yeah, I think enforcement regulation is key. I think without it, MPAs aren't really protected. In Jersey at least, it's a small area, so it's quite easy to an extent to enforce. I won't say easy, but you can enforce it. One of the good things that came out of Brexit was that it meant that Jersey could take full control out of managing its waters. So one of the management measures that Jersey put in was for all commercial fishing vessels to have a vessel monitoring system, and that basically allows a government to track each fishing vessel, whether it's Jersey vessel or a French vessel, and it also tracks the speed of that vessel too. So if the vessel is moving below 5 knots within a protected area, that's an indication that that vessel is trawling or dredging. So that's quite a good way to kind of monitor it from that sense. And that's how Jersey will be doing it, along with kind of in-person vessel boardings, things like that. But elsewhere in the world, I know that other places such as in the Caribbean, they're looking at newer technologies for their areas and their regions. And that could be things like drones. Drones are a hot topic as well on the enforcement side of things, and can be a very efficient way to identify any potential illegal fishing activities. But no, I don't know a huge amount of kind of other enforcement methods that are being used in other projects around the world, but I know that drones are definitely an exciting one that people are talking about a lot.
Also space technology. We're working a lot across our Sea and Space campaign at the moment, and we're learning that this data that satellites are collecting in real time historically and very recently have been part of a massive kind of exposed illegal fishing operation. So I think we're going to see a lot more coming from what's happening between these two opposite worlds. Need to work very closely together in order to help regulate our ocean too. So if anyone has got anything to add on that, please do. Oh yeah, Ian.
Just really quickly, obviously the recreational dive sector is not an enforcement agency, so we don't act as enforcement. But one of the best examples of that I've worked on, it was in Fiji. The local dive operator worked with the local community, worked with local fishing communities to identify a small area where they could establish a shark dive for scuba divers. For divers that come along, witness sharks, and they kind of had an agreement with the local communities, the fishing communities, to not fish this very small area, and in return they would compensate the local communities. They would charge the divers a small fee to enter this not officially protected, protected area, and that fee would go to the local communities as a kind of a compensatory scheme. Over the course of 14 years, the biodiversity absolutely boomed inside this small unofficial protected area. The value of the tourism sector sort of went to the roof because of this. You were guaranteed to see a height of the season 40 or 50 bull sharks within a couple of feet, all swimming around you. I mean, I've done the dive; it's phenomenal. So the the financial compensation to the local communities kind of just kept going up. So they were making more money from not fishing this area. And it came to a point where the local communities then went to the government to lobby to protect this area that was on their doorstep. There was also the spillover of the reefs that they could fish. There was more things like Spanish mackerel and big groupers. So it took 14 years. So this wasn't overnight, but it's kind of one of the examples of the kind of success story of an MPA. But what I'm trying to get with the enforcement is the financial and the fishing benefits that the community were getting meant that the community themselves were suddenly self-enforcing they were patrolling it for illegal activities. And that kind of is an example of if you involve local communities from the outset at identifying and getting involved in MPAs, they're likely to be more successful. And I can just say that, if you're a legal fisherman in that site, you really pray you want to get caught by the authorities and not by the local fishing community, because the consequences differ exponentially. But it's kind of, it does show that, if there's benefits of the MPAs, and there's examples of these benefits around the world, then local communities can also be effective implementers and enforce these MPAs.
Rita.
I wanted to add a little bit as an example, and coming back to Julian's comments about the chasing megafauna that is becoming also a problem. I think using satellite tracking for tourism boats is also a key. So knowing that there are places where limited resources. So if we have a legal framework where these boats are mandatory using these tracking devices, you can monitor them using satellites, and they also have a speed limits and all that. So if you get to see boats that are not doing good practices, they don't have a permit for the next year. And that is enforced here in La Paz as an example with the whale sharks. So there is a limitation of number of boats that can be working in an area. And I think we need to start working on this technology to start using it in other places. So we try to improve the good conduct and better practices where people get the benefit but also respect the marine life.
Yeah, completely agree. Bruno actually, that was one of his kind of comments, was how it should be mandatory that, like planes as boats are, they're all using these kind of trackers, and then it can be monitored. And it's a bit like, when I speak to people about this, I always say, well, you're driving down a motorway, you're not going to go 110 just in case there's the speed camera. It's the kind of same-ish concept. If you think it is being watched and monitored from a person up in the sky, the likelihood, and if the sanctions are in place and they are enforced, they'll be less likely to do it, at least you hope. So I think what's happening in La Paz is a great kind of test bed. I think it can be definitely learned from and used, and I've heard already quite a few success stories from there. So I am mindful of time now. Matt, please let us know if there's any questions that have come in that we've not addressed. I know that people have been answering a few as they go, but I also want to just take this opportunity to ask the panel if there's anything that they really want to add that I've not asked them, they feel quite passionately about getting across before we kind of maybe open up to some questions. Please do. Julian, go for it.
Yes, this also obviously plays into the role of MPAs they play itself, but it also how other aspects that don't really pertain to the MPA itself, but surrounding just the area of the MPA can also influence that. In the example of what I'm trying to get is Alor, for example, as many places in Indonesia, has an increasing plastic pollution problem as well. Not because the local people don't respect the ocean, or they just throw everything where they want, but because of the missing infrastructure to actually be able to do anything against that pollution, because all the stuff that comes in that isn't locally produced from other cities through ferries and airplanes, or that comes in plastic, and there's no real way for them to be able to do anything with that. There are no infrastructures for any recycling plants or for any ways to use that plastic. So there's no real way to get around that. And I think often as people who look at that situation from maybe a privileged point of view, where we go to places and then the people, they don't take care of their ocean. It's really difficult to, as not only as filmmakers but also as policymakers, to kind of find a way around that, because that's not an easy way of fixing these deep-rooted things like missing infrastructure and missing funds and all that stuff. Because at that point you're not talking about maybe cutting off some fishermen from a couple of areas, but you're talking about a whole shift in often federal funding and in the politics itself. So things like that also always play a role when you look at not only MPAs, but also the places you travel and also the places that you witness things. So also always kind of being able to see the big picture, or trying to understand how things kind of work together and what you can actually do about them is, I think, very important.
Dharma.
Thanks a lot. I've seen a question from Petra Rona asking if there's films which do take people on a journey from inland areas or in the city and that link to the ocean. I believe that's a wonderful question. And that's actually something that me and Mark work on. And we were able to do a documentary, a small documentary for CNN, which shows an arid area and links it to the ocean, but very much something that I think it's important to consider as an avenue to grow our movement of ocean guardians, to not just be limited to the coastlines, but to be across our cities. So yeah, if you'd love to see some of those films, I'm sure we can find a way to share them with you.
I did, yeah. I said that to Petra in the chat, Dharma. I think something that you have done remarkably well. And again, going back to my point about how you take your stories on tour, Martina, I know as well, that's something that you're very passionate about how we get these stories in front of people that might not necessarily have even had the opportunity to ever experience the ocean. And, even going back to your film around Tiger Eyes and about her story, about what life-changing experiences this has had and how that film has gone on to reach so many hearts and minds and played such a massive role. And I think how we as filmmakers, how we as storytellers carry these films, and like Ladama said, how we take them back to the communities that have been part of the story is so incredibly important. I think it's something that we can do very much within this subject area too. So I think that actually brings us full circle in a nice way to kind of summarize this wonderful chat that we've all had, and thanks for the audience participation too. And I just want to reaffirm the fact that the OCL really is about these open conversations, sometimes that can be difficult, challenging, positive, and there's a lot of positivity happening within this room right here. And maybe Freddie, we could end on a positive note. I've been reading a little bit about what's happening in Scotland recently in the last few days. I don't know if you want to share anything in regards to some positive ocean MPA news. Oh, audio. Not sure. Is that me, or can I not hear you? We lost you, Freddie. Okay, we'll come back to that. I think we can come back to you in a minute. Matt, is there anything that you want to add, the questions that we've missed, or anything that you feel with the last, well, we've gone over by 4 minutes now. Oh, Julian, sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to jump in, but I did see an interesting questions about the role that us filmmakers have in the growing negative tendency in ecotourism, and also just people traveling to places and trashing the whole thing, which I find myself also often wondering about, especially when I came to Alor, because it's not really a known place for tourism and there is not a lot of tourism going on. So being approached for the movie and like posting about the place itself was really was inner conflict I had, because on one side I wanted people to know about the place and about how treating the ocean right is very rewarding, but on the other side, once you make a place popular, and maybe that goes too quickly, we've seen in a lot of places around the world how that ends, and how that ends up being detrimental to not only the people there but also the ocean. So trying to communicate that and trying to figure out how to, as filmmakers, encourage also the sustainable interaction with animals and the ocean is really difficult. But I think one step that goes pretty far is one working with the local people or local knowledge that do actually know how to treat those places right, and being able to communicate how you can actually treat those places right. Because if you travel from, I don't know, across the globe to a place like that and not being familiar with how you should treat the place, that's not on us to, or that is actually on us to communicate as well. So when we as filmmakers set out and make a movie, it's really important to communicate how not only the actions of tourism could affect that place, but also how a situation as delicate as places that we have encountered or that our MPAs actually are. So yeah, maybe another filmmaker can join in on that answer, but it's a really good question.
Maybe I jump in just very briefly, knowing that we are late for time. But yeah, I completely echo everything that you said. And I think it ties back to the very, very beginning, how to start a film. I think it's time that all of us really are reminded of our responsibilities that we carry. And I think it's as a tourist, as a citizen, as a filmmaker, it doesn't start and end when I play or push the button record. And I think, yeah, not only implementing the people that are there and having this parachute science and parachute traveling where you come in and out and leave and it gets out of your mind, but also to remember how much responsibility we carry in our actions. I think that also is or can be translated into how we interact online, right? Because if we spoil a location and turn it into something that people travel to just for Instagram, then how much conservation effort is it really? So I think it's a very, very difficult subject matter, but it really comes back to responsibility and respect.
I actually think we need to have, and we are going to have, we're actually ironically talking about it today, a whole conversation around parachute storytelling, ethical storytelling. And it's one of the questions that Isabella's just put in terms of like, how do you get started as a filmmaker, and then leaning into conservation filmmaking and all the challenges. And there's such a conversation around that. And it's something that our entire community is facing and continues to face. So I think the whole I think that's naturally led us onto a nice kind of closing point, because it's a chat that we want to have and we have a lot of. So I think a lot of the community will join in on that, and very topical conversation at the moment. So I think we're over time by quite a lot now. I appreciate everyone, it's late and a lot of people have joined from all around the world, which is just so amazing. This is recorded. We are going to send it out maybe to, I'm not sure when, Matt, but we'll have access to this. You can listen back, and please do connect, use the platform, come onto the platform, connect with the panelists that are joining us today, the speakers. And that's what OCR really is about: opening doors for each other, knowledge share, learning from each other, being inspired by each other, and having more conversations like this. And please let us know how this can be better for you next time. Do you want more audience participation throughout? Panelists, let us know too what you've liked, what you haven't. And so we can make this better for everyone that's involved, for sure. Matt, I'm going to pass over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, all I can do here is echo what you've just said there, Tamsin. I mean, incredible panel. Thank you all so much to all the panelists up here. I urge all the attendees to take the names down and reach out. We will send a follow-up. There'll be a follow-up with the film, but also some, social media connections with everybody. And any questions that you've had, I know a lot of questions that have been asked by the panelists. Any questions that you have, reach out. You've listened to the stories now. You understand that everybody's sitting up here. And there was an interesting question by Alexandra in Mexico that I saw about studying marine biology. She's studying marine biology. And, how do you get into it? It's such a big question, isn't it? And it's something that we always talk about at OCL. It's how do you become a storyteller? How do you get into working in these projects? So if we won't go into that answer now, but I think for each and every one, we can share that answer with everybody and just allow people to understand really how you get into it. Because it always seems like a far away idea, and you want to work in these projects that are really making a difference and really making positive change. And I think that's something that could be answered by everyone here. But do reach out, do stay connected. We had 100% participant connection on this chat, and I think I know what we're going to have to be talking about next, Tamsin. So I'm looking forward to the next one. But really, from the bottom of my heart to the panelists, thank you so much for your time and effort and everything that you do globally. And it was, and Tamsin, thank you very much for doing what you do best, sitting up here and asking these questions and listening. And it's been a really great panel. And thank you.
Thank you all so much. I really, really, really appreciate everyone's time and everything we do tirelessly, passionately to help to give a voice to the ocean in all of our sectors. So really such an honor to spend my evening with you all. Thank you.
I'm going to end it here. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tamsin. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you all, gang.
Be in touch.
Thank you.
It's been really good. It's been really, really good.
Thank you.